Welcome to r/revenge stories, where you will hear satisfying revenge stories from 4 different subreddits. If you are new around here, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I upload daily content, and without wasting any more time, let's dive right in. Real estate agent raises the price of house after we already paid our application fee. My girlfriend and I were looking for a place to live in a new city where she had just accepted an internship that did not pay but would hopefully open up big opportunities in the future. I travel for work, so it's easy for me to live anywhere. We looked and looked, but there was nothing in our price range, so we increased a few $100s and finally found a house. It was a bit pricey for what it was, but we were not finding any better places. The lease term was written as 1 or 2 years. We went ahead and submitted an application, which we were pretty confident about since we have good credit and my job pays pretty well. We specified that we wanted the 1-year lease as her internship was only 1 year long. So a few days go by and we hear back from the agent our application was accepted, but the owner wants $150 more rent than was advertised per month since we were only wanting to sign the 1-year lease. I mentioned that it seemed unfair that she had taken our $100 application fee before telling us about this price increase, but I kept it pretty civil, since I did not want to burn a bridge for the only viable option we had. She assured me, condescendingly, that this was perfectly legal and that the owner was entitled to it since he might have to go through the rental process again in a year, and since the rental market was so tight they could do whatever they wanted, and she was right. We had no other options, so I told her that I was sorry and that I would call her back after discussing with my girlfriend. We were so frustrated. The place was so expensive for what it was, especially considering the condition that it was in. It really was tiny. The bedrooms were about 10 feet by 10 feet, which made me feel a little claustrophobic, and the walls were very dirty from the former tenants who apparently had a couple big dogs living inside. There was literally dirt and grease smeared around the walls on the entire interior at about the height of a large dog. The yard was overgrown and trashed, but the lease stated that tenant would be responsible for all landscaping and even specified that we had to keep the lawn in good condition. The lawn was about 2 foot high, completely dead weeds. All of this we convinced ourselves that we would deal with. Scrub the walls and paint, get a lawnmower off Craigslist and pony up the water bill for resurrecting the lawn. Be minimalistic with our possessions. Hopefully the new paint would take care of the lingering dog smell. We had paid $50 each for the application fee and now felt as if we had been bait and switched, but had no other good options and our deadline was coming up fast. My girlfriend was crying and we both felt like homeless misfits that were terrible at life. I could not sleep in our hotel that night, but when I pulled up my bookmarked Craigslist housing searches, I saw something new. A place that looked nice and was about $500 cheaper than the house. Actually inside our original price range. I cautioned myself that it was probably a scam, but sent an email anyways, and in the morning I got a phone call from a nice old man. I set up an appointment and it was great, spacious, clean and much cheaper. The landlord liked us and we signed a lease the same day. We felt so lucky and happy. We were still angry about the other house. The agent had taken our $100 and raised the price on us, probably because she knew how tight the rental market was in the area and that we may not have other options. It had been just 1 day since she informed us about the $150 monthly price increase. I typed an angry email about how we were bait and switched, etc., but knew that it probably would not get us our $100 back and that they would probably barely even read it. I asked my girlfriend if I should send it. She then came up with a brilliant plan for revenge. Do nothing. First, I deleted the email without sending it and we moved into our new place. A few days went by and I got a text message from the agent of the other house asking if we were still interested. I replied that we were still very interested and that we had gone on a trip but would be back in a week or so and would meet up to sign the lease then. She replied that since we were well qualified, that would be fine as long as we were sure we wanted the place. So we started settling into our new place and enjoying ourselves. About 10 days later, I received a call from the agent who seemed to have forgotten about us until then, and she was frantic about getting the lease signed. I made up excuses. My girlfriend was very ill, we need a few more days. We are still 100% interested, and I will call her on Monday to set up a meeting. On Monday, I typed up an email saying, "Sorry, but we decided not to move in after all. Thanks anyways." My girlfriend and I smiled nervously together as we shot the email off. The phone rang almost immediately. It was the agent. I exchanged glances with my girlfriend and answered it, putting her on speakerphone. She was very upset that she had not shown her place for over 2 weeks and that her well-qualified tenants were dropping out. She pleaded with me to reconsider.
"What if I drop the price back to the original price in the ad?"
she asked with desperation heavy in her voice. I pretended to think about it. I looked over at my girlfriend and she was silently laughing and hiding her face in her arms, overcome with emotion. I could feel the tension on the line as the agent hung on my next words. "Yeah, sorry, no," I cheerfully declined. The agent was distraught. I hung up. My girlfriend's plan had worked perfectly. We felt avenged. Next time, maybe she will think twice before bait and switching. Guys, have you ever gotten baited and switched? Let us know in the comments. And by the way, this story was from r/regular revenge. And accordingly, the next story is gonna be from r/petty revenge. And then we're gonna continue with nuclear revenge and pro revenge. Please let me know in the comments whether you enjoy this format or not. The Mispronunciation War. I work with a Nigerian woman with a clearly African name who I will call A here. She's perfectly happy to tell people how to pronounce her name if they have not come across it before, but it really is not difficult to get it right once you have been told. Enter O, anonymized despite being an a-hole. He decided that her name is too hard a name for him to bother even trying with even after she has told him, and calls her Abby. Apparently,
"It's just easier
for him to give her
a normal American name."
I can tell that this irritates A the more he does it, so we hatch a plan together. I only refer to him as Olafur, Icelandic, and she only calls him Odinlate, Nigerian. Of course he gets pissed off, but we both tell him how it's
just easier
for us to give him a name from our respective countries. It took him just under 2 weeks after that to start calling her by her proper name. Though he never got my name wrong, I suspect because I'm a white European man, the solidarity still felt good. Guys, I'm curious, do any of you have a name that is really difficult to pronounce? Let us know in the comments if you want. If you want to destroy employee morale and benefits, then maybe you won't work here anymore. Several years ago, I was just out of college and took a job at a large well-known alcohol store that rhymes with a total shine and floor. By the way, I'm not really familiar with any alcohol stores in the US, so if you guys could help out, that would be amazing. Anyway, I was hired as a seasonal employee for the Christmas season. After working there a few weeks, the permanent employees were telling me about how the current store manager, SM, was relatively new. When SM became the boss, he changed all of the full-time employees' schedules so that no one worked more than the maximum number of hours per week, I think it was 34, before the state required they be provided benefits like health insurance. Before SM, many of the full-timers had set hours and benefits. SM also began creating the employee schedule with no regard to employee input of their availability, as many had second jobs and childcare obligations, nor what the schedules looked like before he came in as SM. He was also not wonderful about customer service. I was a merchandiser, which means I was responsible for moving the boxes and pallets around the store and stocking shelves. I knew absolutely nothing about wine, but I was and am a beer geek, so I was always happy to help with beer questions. There was one instance I went out of my way to get beer from the storage shelf, which needed a ladder to access to get a case that was out of stock on the customer shelf. The storage area had zero organization nor record keeping, so finding a case could take a while. After finding and retrieving the beer, he pulled me aside and said that I should have just told them we were out and to only put that kind of effort in if someone is spending a lot of money, which really set me off and I fumed silently the rest of that day. To no one's surprise, the store became a revolving door for workers, as this had already been going on for several months by the time I started. When the holiday season was nearing the end, SM radioed me to come to the office one day. When I get there, he's looking at the computer and says,
"Hey Ritson, we would like for you to convert to full time."
Wow, what a surprise! We were down to 3 or 4 merchandisers by this time.
"But if you're not, I need to know by January X, which is 3 weeks away. If you quit after that, it counts against my employee turnover numbers."
While I was planning to quit the following week, since I lined up a much better job that did not need me urgently, I decided I would do my part and wait. The day after the turnover date, I quit. Several months later, I visited the store, said hi to folks and asked where SM was. To my great amusement, SM had been let go shortly after my departure. I would like to think I did my part to help that along. And that was petty revenge for today, so if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. All support is very much appreciated, thank you so much. My uncle took revenge on behalf of my parents. As the title gives away, this did not happen to me, but is the story of how my uncle avenged my parents. My parents had me when they were plenty young. They were not teens anymore, but had barely left that age bracket. My mom and dad met in college, that was also when they had me. So, while my parents were in their courses, I mostly stayed with my grandparents. The whole family lives in the same area and the college was not that far away. My parents were still young and liked to go out with friends on occasion. When the following happened, I was a few years old. On occasion, they frequented a bar. A drunk guy there groped my mom and did not take a no as a no. My dad intervened and stopped the guy. And half an hour later, all seemed forgotten. The music was loud, the bar crowded, and then someone in the crowd hit my dad with an empty glass pitcher square in the face. He was bleeding profusely and collapsed. But in the press, semi-darkness and over the music, no one knew who did it. My dad got taken to the hospital. He had a broken nose and a heavy concussion. He also could not see who had attacked him, and his memory between the alcohol and being hit in the head was also very fuzzy. Of course, they had considered the guy who had harassed my mom, but they did not know him. Nor did they see him anywhere leading up to the moment, let alone have any evidence, so they pressed charges against unknown. But there was virtually nothing anyone could do. But then, a few days later, the piece of crap that had harassed my mom approached her on campus. Turns out he was in the same college as my parents. We made a few veiled comments and left little doubt that it had been him that hit my dad in the face. And the piece of garbage let my mom know that my dad next time should mind his manners. And that the little touching he had done did not hurt anyone and was not that bad. And if he wanted to do it again, he would, and maybe more. And then the piece of crap went on his merry way. My mom was horrified, of course. She went home and told my grandparents, my dad, and his parents. But no one could do anything. It was a he said she said deal after all. And my mom had not even gotten the guy's name. My mom cried a lot at that time and did not know what to do. She also was afraid of going to classes or out alone. I honestly only remember that time very scarcely. I was just a little kid. But I can remember my dad in the hospital and with his broken nose. And my mom crying a lot. My dad, of course, was just as angry and humiliated as my mom. No one knew what to do and everyone was treading on eggshells around each other. But that is where my uncle enters the stage. My uncle, my mom's brother, lived on the other side of the country. He was a PI and he was, of course, the last to hear the full story. But the moment he heard someone had threatened his little sister, he was on his way home. After hearing the full story, my uncle knew it would likely be hard to get the guy on the harassment, the assault or the threats, having no evidence. My uncle had my mom point the guy out from afar on campus. It took a few days to find him. But then my uncle started to stalk that piece of human filth. My uncle took sick days, all his vacation, and invested every second possible to find out everything about the harasser. My uncle even approached the pig in another bar and became drinking buddies with him. Over several weeks, my uncle had uncovered all manners of illicit behavior: possession, consumption, and distribution of drugs, theft, and a few other misdemeanors and small-time stuff. And my uncle could have put him away for that, but my uncle always said, when asked about that if he sent the a-hole to prison, it would be for molesting my mom and hurting my dad. And that is what he did. One night, while out with his new buddy, drinking, my uncle made the idiot piss drunk and they landed in my uncle's motel room. He got the harasser to incriminate himself on video, rattling off a list of illegal crap he was up to. My uncle had, of course, pretended to be a crook too. Among the stories a-hole told was the story of how he groped some chick and brained her dude with a pitcher of beer. Now, something needs to be said. In my country, of course, recording someone in secret is illegal, and under some conditions, like if the police does it, it is not a permissible piece of evidence in court. But as a PI, I suppose that means police officer or something, my uncle knew that laws for that exactly. But paradoxically, the situation is different if it is not only audio but also video. And my uncle had the a-hole on camera confessing. The next day, my uncle turned himself into the police with all his collected evidence because secretly filming people was still a crime. Though the video could be used as evidence in court as my uncle was not affiliated with the police or any other governmental agency. When the criminal trial and the civil trial were over, the a-hole got 6 years in prison and had to pay damages to my mom and dad. And my uncle got slapped with the equivalent of a $2,000 fine for secretly filming that a-hole. Money well spent, he always said. You know guys, I find it really interesting that the uncle after all had to pay $2,000 because he filmed that guy secretly. I'm wondering if in another situation, if you film someone robbing a store, whether you still have to pay that $2,000 fine when you present the evidence to the police. Seems like a silly rule to me, especially when you film a criminal. I am the Padawan, my dad is the master. This story is from r/nuclear revenge. Back in 1991, my dad bought my mom a brand new Chevy Caprice. You know, the big, ugly, fat as a whale cop car. It was white with fake mesh wheels and white wall tires. My mother loved it. She had it 2 weeks and kept it parked in front of our house in SoCal. The guy across the street was a contractor. Back in 1991, that basically meant shady douchebag that hired illegals that stood outside Home Depot. Shady douche started remodeling a house up the street from us on our side of the road. They were doing some stucco work. At the end of the day, his workers decided to just dump the leftover stucco in the gutter and try to hose it down the street. It got all over my mom's tires, she did not notice, drove off, and it went all over the passenger side of her car. My dad was not happy, not one bit. We went across the street to talk to the contractor neighbor. My dad is a 6'3" Air Force Vietnam Purple Heart recipient. He has fired a weapon in anger. Neighbor was a 5'4" a-hole with an attitude. Dad goes over and explains the situation, actually keeping his calm. He asks the guy to have the stucco removed from the car. The neighbor tells my dad to go F himself. I'm expecting my dad at this point to kill said neighbor. Instead he says, okay, and walks back across the street. He has my mom's car detailed, and that is that. 7 years later, my dad and I are watching a LAKEY game and it is about 10 at night and it is halftime. My dad says, I will be right back. He walks out of the house, goes into the garage and gets 2 1-gallon buckets of paint. He walks across the street and dumps it all over the neighbor's brand new BMW convertible. The neighbor had left the top down because it was in May and the weather was nice in Southern California. So the entire outside and inside of the BMW is now covered in paint. My dad walks back, puts the paint cans back in the garage, closes the door and comes back to watch the rest of the game. The next morning, the neighbor comes out and sees his car. We hear him saying out loud to his wife,
I don't understand who would have done this. I don't get this at all.
He had forgotten all about the stucco. My dad just waited and waited. Fast forward to now, 7 years ago, an a-hole down my road hit my dog and killed him, then drove off. I found his hubcap in the road next to my dog and confronted him.
Oh, I thought it was a deer.
I am waiting for a really nice day. The paint is ready in my basement. Honestly, in my opinion, that story was not really nuclear revenge. I mean, alright, an expensive BMW basically got ruined, but compared to other nuclear revenge stories, this one was kind of tame. Let me know what you think about the story in the comments.